The sound came first, the click of a key turning inside the lock, sealing fate. Mom, starting next month, you'll stay with Aunt Verna. There's no more room here. I had my hand on the wooden spoon, stirring the beans like I always did, when Naomi said that, looking at her phone, not at me. Terrence, her husband, nodded from across the room, his jacket already over his arm. On the table, 2 empty wine glasses waited for a toast that never came. The kitchen clock read 7:07 p.m., ticking straight inside my chest. The smell of bay leaf rose from the pot, but the taste in my mouth was iron. On the shelf, my picture with Elias, the man I built this roof with, watched me in silence. And in that silence, I was born again. "It's better for everyone, Miss Ruby," Terrence offered, saying my name like a stamp of authority. Better for who? I thought, but didn't say. Silence was my armor. I served her plate, like always, washed the glasses, like always, turned off the stove, and closed the pot carefully, like someone covering a body. The house breathed low, an old wooden moan. I heard every sound: the dripping faucet, the upstairs neighbor dragging a chair, the fridge coughing ice. They all whispered the same word: enough. In the hallway, the picture from our last Easter was crooked. I straightened it with my fingertips. Behind the glass, a version of me smiled at a family I no longer recognized. The table I once called an altar had become a pier, a place of departure, not reunion. Have you ever loved someone who tried to erase you? If this question touches your story, write "I resist" in the comments. Not for me, for you. Sometimes we need to see our own word written to remember we exist. I went back to the kitchen slowly. Naomi was talking about deadlines, boxes, logistics, as if I were a piece of furniture too big for the room. Her voice carried peace, the peace of someone who believes they have the right. I let her finish, and when the final click came, "So, it's settled," I answered with the only thing I had left, an unspoken no. I took my purse from the hook like someone touching a sacred book. Inside was what no one knew: the key to my studio downtown, rented under my maiden name, Ruby Mae Carter, after Elias passed. A refuge for when faith asked for silence. No one had a copy of that key. God had woken me before the fall. "My dignity is not negotiable," I said it softly, to myself. The words landed on my chest with the right kind of weight. Naomi was still listing benefits. "It's closer to Aunt Verna's clinic, Mom, and we're just in a phase," each word polished with care but smelling of an elegant eviction. Terrence checked his watch, anxious to look noble in his own speech. I didn't cry. Evidence is respect for the future, and tears don't sign papers. I walked to the window. The street breathed in cycles, distant horns, a nearby motorcycle, the train cutting the night into slices. I felt the wind on my skin like a simple gospel: bread, air, life. Lord, if I still have value, show me how to resist without hardening. The Spirit answered in the details: the quiet kettle, the empty chair waiting for me, the cupboard door that always stuck but opened easily this time. On the top shelf, I found an envelope from the bank. I had brought it earlier, by intuition. I placed it on the table. Terrence glanced at it quickly. I recognized the fear of a man who knows documents are morning dew before the sun. "Mom, don't make this hard," Naomi started. I just smiled, the kind of smile that says, "I'm not your enemy, but I'm not your property either." Silence returned, but this time it belonged to me. The house heard it. The old floorboards creaked like someone turning over in bed. I remembered Sister Bernice's voice, my downstairs neighbor. "Child, when love asks for everything and gives nothing back, pray. Prayer won't change the wolf, but it'll give you back your skin." I finished drying the last glass and put it away. "When you need me, call," I said. "Tonight I'm sleeping out." "Now." Naomi's eyes widened. "Now," I grabbed my coat, touched the table like sealing a pact. The wood was cold. My hands were steady. I passed through the living room where the TV still whispered the news. In the picture frame, Elias seemed to walk me to the door. "Go in peace, Ruby," I heard inside. The street met me with damp air and the flicker of a streetlight, a beacon. I descended the 3 flights of stairs unhurried. Each step was a step back to myself. In my pocket, the studio key felt light, the weight of freedom. Outside, I called Sister Bernice. "You awake, neighbor?" "Awake and ready to pray. God warned you, didn't he?" "He did, and now I've heard him." I got in the car and let the radio find me. Mahalia was singing softly, "Precious Lord, take my hand," as if the soundtrack of my life had finally returned to the right note. In the rearview mirror, the lights of my old altar faded. I don't belong to anyone who measures my worth by my usefulness. At the stoplight, an old woman crossed slowly, carrying bags of bread. The smell drifted through my window and made me want to laugh and cry all at once. A sign can be something simple. Sometimes it's just the scent of warm bread, reminding you that ordinary life is still a miracle. I drove downtown, opened the studio. The old lamp lit up with the tenderness of an embrace. I put water on to boil. On the table, I laid down the bank envelope and a brown-covered notebook. On the first page, I wrote in blue ink, "Evidence is respect for the future. Faith is also strategy." I closed my eyes and let the kettle sing softly, unhurried, like a prayer with breath to spare. It wasn't escape, it was a border, the border where God would teach me to live for myself first, and then for others, without losing myself again. I thought I had seen everything, until I opened the forgotten folder in the back of the cabinet and found the first signature that wasn't mine. Have you ever trusted someone who wanted you silent? Right, I resist. This isn't to comfort me, it's to promise yourself. The word you write gives you back your ground. The scent of day-old coffee mixed with the faded perfume of jasmine on the scarf I'd worn since the days when Elias still called me my gentle strength. On the studio table, the mug released steam, and that aroma carried me straight to another time, a time when love still tasted like fresh bread out of the oven. I closed my eyes, and the past came rushing back. In the old wooden kitchen, I was Ruby Mae Carter, newly married, stirring a wooden spoon like conducting a choir of promises. Elias would come home from work, his face covered in dust and hope. He used to say, "One day, this house will smell like the future, Ruby." And I believed him. We didn't have much, but we had ritual. Every Sunday, the table set, white cloth, roasted chicken, and prayer before the first bite. I always served those who arrived tired first, like my mother taught me. "She who serves with love never eats alone," she used to say. Now I understand. Sometimes those who serve too much forget to feed themselves. When Naomi was born, the world felt new again. I promised God she would never go without. I worked in 2 households, scrubbing other women's floors to keep my own clean. Every spare dollar went into a glass jar with handwritten ribbons, Naomi's school, field trip, new uniform. My faith was the vault, my daughter, the treasure. I remember the first pair of patent leather shoes she ever got. She jumped in puddles, laughing, the sun glinting off her braided hair. Elias hugged me and said, "Ruby, she's going places." And she did. Too far, even from me. The memories blended with the smell of blue soap and boiling pots. On the wall of that old kitchen, I had an embroidered frame that read, "Family is shelter, not debt." How many times did I read that without grasping the prophetic warning God had already stitched there? In the years that followed, Elias left. Cancer came softly and left quickly. The day the coffin went down, rain fell like heaven, trying to hide its own tears. Naomi was 16 and swore she'd take care of me. "I promise, Mom." There'll always be room for you in my house. Funeral promises tend to evaporate under the first sunlight of adulthood. After she married Terrence, the scent of my house changed. The jasmine was replaced by hotel-grade disinfectant. The laughter faded. The oven was rarely used, and when I baked something, they said the kitchen smelled old. I, who had always believed cooking was a language of love, found myself speaking a tongue no one understood anymore. I still remember Kira's birthday, my granddaughter. I made cornbread cake with lemon glaze. Naomi smiled faintly. "Oh, Mom, they prefer bakery cake. It's easier." I hid the sting with more sugar in the icing. And when Kira blew out her candles, I prayed that the Holy Spirit would also blow over my patience. As the coffee cooled in the studio, I tasted the bitter memory that never left. The night Naomi borrowed my bank card to pay an urgent bill. That was the first crack, and afraid of being called suspicious, I let it go. Family is for trusting, I told myself, as if love were a legal defense. But it was really a warning. Those who never set boundaries eventually become one. The studio clock read 7:15. I picked up my notebook and wrote, "Lord, teach me to love without erasing myself." I paused. The wind carried the scent of rain, and in that fragrance of wet earth, I saw the old house again, the curtains, the radio's hum, Elias's laughter, Naomi's small hand asking, "More juice, Mama." Everything felt so vivid I could almost reach out and touch it, but instead of the coffee cup, there was the bank envelope. I pressed it against my chest. Inside, I knew, were answers that would hurt, but also a chance to reclaim my self-respect. Have you ever given everything to someone who couldn't see your worth? If so, write "I understand" in the comments. Sometimes healing begins when you realize the pain didn't happen only to you. The steam from the coffee had faded, but its scent still filled the air. And for the first time in a long while, I felt hunger. Not for food, for life. I took the day-old bread, sliced it, spread butter, and the hiss of the skillet sounded like a prayer. The flame from the stove lit up the open notebook, and between the crackle of bread and the sizzle of butter, I heard something inside me whisper, "You've served everyone, Ruby. Now serve God and yourself." I ate slowly, as if tasting the first miracle, closed the notebook, looked at the envelope once more, and I knew God was preparing the truth to be digested. I thought I had seen it all, until I recognized my own signature where I had never written my name. The bank envelope had been there since the night before, but only that morning had my hands stopped trembling enough to open it. The paper was thick, expensive, and the sound of it unfolding echoed through the studio like a confession. The first lines were simple: joint account, ownership update. Nothing strange there, but one glance was enough to make the ground shift beneath me. There was a signature, my name, but the R in Ruby was straight, cold, missing the soft loop I'd drawn since I was a girl. And just below it, firm and confident, was another, Naomi C. Whitaker. 2 lines, 2 fates, one act that wasn't a mistake. For a few seconds I stood still, listening to the clock's tick and the wind tapping the window. The air felt heavier, the world slower. I set the paper on the table and let the truth breathe. Family doesn't force a pen into the hand of someone they love. The sentence came from deep inside, calm, clean, undeniable. I put on my glasses and read it all again, now with the eyes of someone investigating, not trusting. There it was. Transfers, loan authorization, a credit line marked for home improvements. Date, March 11th. Signature, Ruby M. Carter. But I knew, that day I'd been at the hospital with Sister Bernice. I stepped back. The world looked like the same room, but everything's soul had changed. Even the old lamp seemed to pity me. I sat down slowly. Anger didn't come. Something worse did. understanding. Naomi had always had a sweet talent for persuasion. Since childhood, she'd known how to cry beautifully. When she wanted something, she began with me. "You deserve to rest, Mom. Let me handle it, Mom." And I, thinking love meant letting others act, signed more than I ever should have, not just on paper. I unfolded the second sheet. There it was, a copy of an investment made in my name, a large amount, the same forged signature, this time with a long, sweeping "Y." The stroke of someone who writes without fear and without asking permission. The kettle began to hum, faint at first, then louder, a warning. I rose to turn it off. Steam fogged the window as if the house itself were crying with me. I picked up the phone. Naomi's number was saved as "my daughter." For a second, my thumb hovered over the green button. Then I let the phone drop onto the table. God didn't want me to call. He wanted me to see. I walked to the mirror hanging by the door. Looked at my face in the noon light. Deep lines, tired eyes, but something new there. Quiet strength. "Lord," I whispered, "don't let me grow hard, but don't let me yield either." When I returned to the table, I noticed another smaller envelope inside the folder. I opened it. It was a payment receipt, down payment for a new car, current year's model, buyer's name, Terrence Whitaker, financial responsible party, Ruby M. Carter. The engine of deception was officially registered. I sat back down and rested my forehead in my hands. My body trembled, but my spirit stood still, watching everything with the clarity of a courtroom. The house around me seemed to watch too, silent, like an audience that already knew the ending. I heard the phone vibrate. A message from her. "Good morning, Mom. Don't forget lunch at Aunt Verna's on Sunday. Love you." Irony has a scent, and it can make you sick. I picked up the brown notebook and wrote, "Evidence is respect for the future." And below it, faith doesn't ask for blindness. It asks for discernment. I took a deep breath, opened the wardrobe in the corner where I keep old boxes. At the bottom, a blue folder. Inside it, old receipts, photos, certificates, the archive of my life. And among the papers, a small Christmas card Naomi had written when she was 8. "To Mommy, with eternal love." Eternal love was written in purple marker, the word eternal trailing off the paper like an unfinished promise. A child's love is pure promise. An adult's, sometimes an expired contract. I looked back at the forged documents. They weren't just frauds. They were portraits of what love had become. Trust used as a tool. Devotion turned into dependence. Suddenly, the lamp flickered. The light failed, then returned. And in that flicker, I felt the Spirit say, "Don't rush. Observe." The Holy Spirit doesn't stop the fall. He shows the exact moment the ground starts to crack. And in that moment, I saw it. The crack wasn't in the contract. It was in the word family. The phone vibrated again. A message from Sister Bernice. "I dreamed of you. God told me to tell you. Don't sign anything else." I smiled. God speaks even through a neighbor's dream. When love blinds you, He sends the message with a full address. I took the envelope and placed it in my bag, along with the notebook. Faith is a shield, but it's also strategy. I didn't know what was coming, but I could already feel the wind changing. That night, the wind felt different. The house was breathing, and for the first time, it began to speak. If you've ever felt someone use your love to manipulate you, write "I heard." Sometimes God speaks first in silence, and only later through evidence. Night arrived like an apology for being late. The wind slipped through the cracks of the studio, and every gust seemed to whisper a name I hadn't spoken in days. Truth. I took a blanket, sat by the window, and let the silence do what it always does when we stop resisting. Speak. Outside, the street went to sleep early. A dog barked in the distance, a lamppost flickered 3 times, and the sound of a train cutting through the horizon reminded me of a heartbeat, loud, stubborn, alive. Inside, the clock read 9:17. I thought of Elias. He always said houses have souls, and that when the soul grows sad, the house feels cold. That night, the studio seemed to breathe heavily, as if trying to tell me something I'd been pretending not to hear. I got up to light a candle, not because there was no electricity, but out of habit. Since I was a girl, I've lit candles whenever I feel the spirit draw near. The flame danced restlessly, tilting to the left. "Lord," I whispered, "if I still have worth, show me what I need to see." The wind passed, and the flame straightened. That's when I heard it. First, a soft creak from the cabinet, then the faint sound of paper falling. I approached slowly, like someone walking toward an altar. Behind the folded sheets, a thin, aged envelope with its seal almost erased. My name written in pen, Ruby M. Carter, confidential. The paper felt cold, damp around the edges. I opened it carefully. Inside was a typed letter on yellowed paper. "Dear Mrs. Carter, based on recent account activity, an extraordinary credit authorization has been added to your account. Document signed by your legal representative, Mrs. Naomi Whitaker." Legal representative. The word cut through me like an ice blade. My own blood had named herself the guardian of my life, while I was still breathing. I sat on the edge of the bed, my whole body bristling. For a moment, the pain made me forget to breathe. But the spirit whispered, "Be still. Now you see." I closed my eyes. I felt a chill run through my hands. Not fear, but discernment. The candle flame trembled, casting shadows on the walls, and for an instant I saw Elias's silhouette projected on the curtain, as if he were there, watching me, waiting for me to rise. "You taught me to fight, my love," I thought. "Now it's my turn to fight for our name." I stood up, went to the kitchen. The kettle was still warm from afternoon tea. I straightened the dish towel on the stove. The cloth slipped to the floor, and when I bent to pick it up, I noticed a white envelope pushed under the cabinet. My heart jolted. I picked it up with my fingertips, not understanding how it had ended up there. Inside, a business card. Ellen Parker, account manager, First National Bank. On the back, a hurried note. Call before it's too late. Birmingham phone number. Date, 3 months ago. I sat at the table and pressed the card to my chest. Tears came. Warm tears, like the kind you cry when you realize God was preparing the way long before the fall. The house fell silent, but the silence wasn't empty. It was presence. I felt the air grow lighter, the scent of jasmine return, and I remembered Sister Bernice's voice last Sunday. When the Spirit wants to speak, he'll even move a curtain. Suddenly, the old radio that hadn't worked in months lit up by itself. Static first, then a voice. Mahalia Jackson singing "Trouble of the World." I smiled through tears. Lord, if this message is for me, I've received it. I picked up the notebook and wrote, God speaks when the world goes quiet. And when he speaks, the chill becomes a warning, not a threat. I blew out the candle. The smell of melting wax mingled with the night air. That's when I heard a message ping on my phone. Unknown number. Good evening, Mrs. Carter. I'm Simone James, an attorney, Ms. Ellen Parker asked me to reach out if anything strange happened with your account. We need to talk. My hands trembled, but my heart grew calm. Lord, I murmured, so this is it. I sent a short reply. I'm ready. I turned off the phone, sat on the bed, and closed my eyes. The wind stilled. The house finally felt at peace. But the spirit still whispered one last sentence before sleep took me. Tomorrow, Ruby, the cold won't come from outside. It will try to slip in through the voice of the one who calls you Mother. If you've ever felt God warn you in silence, write, "I heard." Because sometimes the miracle doesn't shout, it breathes. The next dawn, the phone rang, and I knew the conspiracy was underway. Dawn smelled like wet iron. The wind whined through the cracks like a cornered animal. I was half awake when the phone buzzed on the table, skittering across the wood as if it wanted to escape its own ring. 2:19 a.m., a familiar number. I answered without hurry. "Mom, something happened." Naomi's voice rushed out, tripping over syllables. In the background, the hum of an engine and car doors slamming. The new manager froze the account. It was a misunderstanding. "I need you to authorize it now, by text." I breathed through my nose, slowly, like someone counting the steps inside her chest. "Naomi, send it in writing." "Mom, there's no time. This is grown-up stuff." I closed my eyes. The spirit whispered inside me, the same phrase it always sends when a trap wears urgency as perfume. "Don't rush. Observe." On the other end, I heard Terrence murmur something meant to sound like control. I aimed the phone toward the recorder and silenced notifications. "Where are you, daughter?" "At the bank. We came now because... Her voice cracked. I could hear hurry breathing on both ends. I stood and turned on only the bedside lamp, letting the studio glow in a honey-colored half-light. On the table, I lined up Ellen Parker's card, the letter, Simone's email on the screen, and the extraordinary authorization envelope with its bent paperclip. The pieces of the puzzle breathed beside me. "Mom, are you listening? They're going to take the apartment." I looked out the window. The wet street reflected the lamplight in ripples. "Naomi, that apartment leaves my hands only when God says so." Silence. Then the muffled sound of someone covering the phone to consult an accomplice. My own breath became the only sound in the room. Inhale, hold, exhale. The heart, once unsteady, found its conductor. "Send me the contract by photo, sweetheart. If it's legitimate, I'll call the manager myself." She hung up without replying. 5 minutes of wind and dripping water. Then 3 messages landed like hammer blows. IMG 2341, IMG 2342, IMG 2343. I opened them. Signature, Ruby M. Carter. The pen stroke straight, dry, the R sharp like a blade. I smiled faintly. I never wrote an R like a knife. Mine blooms like a flower. I put the phone on speaker and dialed Simone. She answered with the voice of someone who sleeps close to justice, alert even with eyes closed. "Mrs. Ruby." "It's time, my dear." I sent the photos, heard the soft ping of incoming mail on her end, the click of analysis, the throat clear of someone who just found what they needed. "That's it. We've got the forgery pattern. Don't authorize anything. Don't go anywhere alone. Copy me on everything." "I already am. And I'm recording." I'd barely finished the sentence when the studio doorknob rattled. Once, twice, 3 times, I froze upright. "Mom, open up. We need to settle this now." Naomi, her tone a blend of daughter and crisis manager. "Ruby, open the door or it'll get worse for you," Terrence hissed, his authority on loan. I crossed the room slowly, set the phone on the table, speaker on, microphone facing the door. "Simone, stay with me on the line." "I'm here." I unlocked the first latch but kept the chain. Opened it just a hand's width. The hallway breathed rain and expensive perfume back at me. They stood there, dripping. Naomi's eyes hid under her hood. Terrence held a folder stamped with the bank's embossed logo, as if a crest could certify truth. "Mom, it's simple, okay? Sign on the phone and it's done." I reached through the gap, motioning for them to show me the papers. Terrence pulled out a plastic sleeve. Verification form, my forged signature repeated 3 times. I lifted it closer to my face. The ink still shone wet. "You signed this yesterday." I smiled. "Yesterday at 5, I was with Sister Bernice at the prayer service, streamed live. Want to see the video?" Terrence stepped back half a pace. Naomi tried to move forward. The chain trembled. "Mom, you're confused. They said because of your age, it's safer if someone manages—" I raised my hand, slicing her speech in half. My chest rose and fell in the rhythm I know too well, the courage that decides to stay. I spoke softly, each syllable laid like a brick. "My dignity is not negotiable." The corridor seemed to cool. Even the drip from the railing slowed down. Inside, the old radio hissed, then for a second hummed a Mahalia note, stamping divine attendance. Naomi tried the affection card. "I'm your daughter, and I'm your mother, not your source. We're just trying to protect what's ours." When you say ours, you're including my name without my voice. That has another name, usurpation. I took a paperclip from my pocket and handed it through the gap. "Pin your hair back, sweetheart. It's falling in your eyes. And give me the document calmly." She froze, surprised by tenderness in the middle of a domestic courtroom. Her hand trembled. The paper came through. I brought it closer to the lamp. The paper breathed light and revealed its wound. In one corner, a crooked seal. At the bottom, a stamp dated for the following day. A common mistake of those who plan the fraud before the time comes. I snapped 3 photos, sent them to Simone and Ellen Parker with the subject line, "Discrepant signatures, attempted night authorization." On the other side, Terrence lost patience. "This is going to get complicated. You have no idea what—" "Terrence," I said, "you call me ma'am, so you don't have to call me owner. But this account, this roof, and this name have an owner, and she's speaking now." He lowered the folder. Naomi looked away. Outside, the rain thickened into sheets. My breath grew audible, but it wasn't exhaustion. It was power in motion. "You two are going home," I continued. "Tomorrow, 9 a.m. The attorney and the bank manager will meet us. In daylight, no hidden commas." "Mom, I love you. That's exactly why I won't allow you to wound my name." I closed the door. The click of the chain sounded like a period at the end of a sentence that had run too long. I paused, resting my forehead against the cool wood, and breathed deep. Inhale, hold, exhale. The body trembled, not with fear, but with release. The phone buzzed. "Simone. Received. It's proof. I'll meet you at the bank at 9. Sleep." I smiled, pressed Ellen Parker's card into my palm, a silent thank you where words didn't fit, went to the window. The city, rinsed clean, looked like a blessing hung out to dry. "Lord, don't let me hate, let me understand." The lamp spilled light across the brown notebook. I wrote, "I am not what was taken from me. I am what God restored." The night quieted, and so did my chest. Somewhere in a distant apartment, an electronic bell chimed 3 a.m. I smiled without meaning to. 3. Father, Son, Spirit. The only ones who never cast me out of the place where I belong. I lay down with socks on, the way my mother taught me on rainy nights. The sound of my own breath turned into a lullaby. Inhale, hold, exhale. I fell asleep knowing morning would come bright, with a clean name, firm boundaries, and God's hand steady beneath my step. When daylight came, the light entered with the help I never expected. The sun rose in shades of copper. It slipped through the cracks of the studio and lit the lamp even though it was off, as if the glow came from within. I got up with a tired body, but a straight soul. The kettle hissed like it was saying, "Now go." I put on the bluish-gray dress, the same one I'd worn to Elias's funeral. That day, he left. Today, I was leaving fear. I applied deep wine lipstick, the shade Sister Bernice calls Dignity Red. Looked at my reflection and murmured, "Lord, may your justice walk with me, but let your peace arrive first." Before 9, the doorbell rang. I opened it. Simone James, young, steady, calm-voiced. She carried a leather folder and the smile of someone who's seen despair and learned not to flinch from it. "Ready, Mrs. Ruby?" "Ready and protected." We left. The morning wind smelled of cleansing. The bank was 15 minutes away. On the way, Simone explained everything with the patience of an angel. They forged a power of attorney, but the new manager got suspicious. The system froze the account. That's why they called you in the middle of the night. What they tried yesterday is a crime. And now you speak to me. I speak to the law, and God speaks above us. We entered the lobby. The marble floor was cold beneath our feet, but faith warmed from within. The manager met us nervously, clutching a stack of papers. "Mrs. Carter, we've confirmed multiple different signatures. Would you like to file a formal complaint?" I looked at Simone. She nodded softly but didn't push. Faith doesn't impose. It proposes. I thought of Naomi, of her trembling voice, of the little girl with braids running across the yard, of the cornbread cake she once said smelled like childhood. I drew a deep breath and answered, "I don't want prison. I want respect, and I want my name clean." The silence that followed was reverent, almost liturgical. Simone placed her hand over mine with the tenderness of a daughter who understands before she speaks. "Then let's clean it up, Mrs. Ruby. Forgiveness is a prayer, but paperwork is a shield." I signed the document with the calm of someone planting a tree. Each stroke of the pen seemed to reclaim stolen ground. Across the table, the manager wiped the sweat from her forehead. "It's done. Ownership returns to you, and from now on, any transaction requires your presence." "Thank you." I looked out the window, sunlight striking the building windows like heaven stamping the moment. Divine justice doesn't carry a seal, but it always arrives on time. As we walked out, Simone shared stories of other women. One lost her house to her brother, another to her son-in-law, another to her pastor. I stopped mid-sidewalk. "And they all survived," she smiled. "Some did. The ones who refused to hide their pain, they turned it into testimony." We went back to the studio. The scent of jasmine and coffee greeted us. Simone made copies of every document and handed me a folder. "Keep this safe, Mrs. Ruby, and write everything in your journal. Documented pain becomes the seed of justice. And if they come back, then let them find the right woman, not the same one." As she packed her things, the noon light poured in golden waves, illuminating the open notebook on the table. I wrote, "Faith is a shield, but also a strategy. God doesn't sleep, he waits for us to wake." Simone glanced over and smiled. "Can I use that line in my next case?" "You can, but tell them it was written by a woman who learned late and learned well." When she left, the house fell silent again. But it was a good silence, warm and full of new air. I sat down, closed my eyes, and gave thanks. For Ellen, who kept copies. For Simone, who brought courage. And for God, who wrote my name back inside me. If you're listening and have ever been deceived by someone who claimed to protect you, remember this: faith is also defense. Strategy is also prayer, and silence, sometimes, is just God sharpening your voice. Share this story with a strong woman who's forgotten her worth. Courage is contagious, and faith, too, is strategy. Days later, the phone rang again. And this time, it wasn't to deceive me. It was to free me. The clock read 10:02 when the call came. It was Simone. Mrs. Ruby, we need you at the bank. The manager and legal team are ready. It's time. My heart quickened, not from fear, but from that sacred chill faith brings before it moves. I put on my beige coat, the same one I'd worn when Elias was diagnosed. That day, I feared losing love. Today, I feared losing compassion. And I refused to leave the house carrying resentment. Before stepping out, I looked at his portrait on the shelf. My love, you taught me never to run from what's right. Today I'm finishing what we started, living with dignity. The bank felt different. The lights seemed brighter, the sounds slower, as if time itself were showing respect. In the meeting room, 4 people: Simone, steady; the manager, nervous; a bank attorney, no tie, holding a tablet; and on the other side of the table, Naomi. She looked pale, hair hastily tied back, eyes swollen, the look of someone who hasn't slept or dreamed. Beside her, an empty chair, Terrence's. I thought, God has already begun separating wheat from chaff. Mrs. Carter, began the attorney, we've confirmed multiple forged signatures. The bank accepts partial responsibility, but we need your decision to proceed with criminal charges or simply restore your rights. Naomi lowered her eyes. The tears were there but wouldn't fall, perhaps from shame, perhaps from calculation. I took a deep breath, looked up at the white ceiling and prayed, Lord, give me words that cleanse, not burn. When I spoke, my voice was calm, almost gentle, but carried the weight of an entire life. I don't want revenge, I want respect, and I want my name clean. The attorney nodded. Simone placed a document in front of me. Sign here, Mrs. Ruby. This restores full ownership of your account and your property. I took the pen. My hands were steady, and the sound of the nib sliding over paper felt like a psalm, and justice descended to earth disguised as a signature. I signed each page slowly. Each letter of my name read like a verse of redemption. When I finished, I looked at Naomi. Daughter, what you did was wrong. But the worst part was believing I was blind. God gave me eyes not only to see, but to discern. She tried to speak, but her voice broke. Mom, I just wanted... You wanted what was mine, but you forgot. What's mine was never money, it was peace. Silence settled. Even the air seemed to wait. Then Simone opened the folder and handed an envelope to the manager. These are the case files. Everything's archived with the bank. No woman should have to rely on someone's remorse to receive justice. The manager exhaled, relieved. It's all settled, Mrs. Carter. Not quite. Forgiveness was still missing. But that, I knew, doesn't get signed on paper. I looked at Naomi once more. She was truly crying now. Mom, I've lost everything. No, child, you've only lost what you stole. What's yours? God can still return if your repentance is real. I stood. Sunlight streamed through the glass, falling across the table and lighting up my hands. It was a warm light, late summer kind of warm. The room, once cold, felt like a temple. I felt Elias there, not in body, but in presence. And a soft voice whispered, Now, Ruby, now you are free. Simone gathered the papers and looked at me with a kind of professional tenderness. Mrs. Ruby, do you realize what you just did? Other women will follow this path because of you. I smiled. Then it was already worth it. When we stepped outside, the sun was almost liquid gold. Sister Bernice was waiting on the sidewalk, her Bible in hand, and that smile that always smells like wisdom. So, child, God wasn't late, Bernice. He was just waiting for the harvest season. She took my hand and said, Forgiveness cleans the past, but boundaries protect the future. I nodded, feeling her words settle soft as a hymn. Back at the studio, the silence was different, no longer pain, but echo. the echo of a voice that had finally been heard. I opened my notebook and wrote, "Evidence is respect for the future, but forgiveness is respect for the past." I closed the journal. I felt the cycle close, but not the purpose. The spirit whispered, "Now, Ruby, what you've learned isn't to keep, it's to teach." I picked up the phone and recorded a message for Sister Bernice. "Neighbor, I think it's time we start something. A group for women of faith and dignity. Not to complain about life, but to remind each other that love isn't servitude." She replied within seconds, "I already have the name, Never Alone." I looked toward the window. The afternoon light painted the sky in honey and gold, and deep inside, I felt Elias smile. Evidence is respect for the future. Days later, I received a letter, not from the bank or the court, but from heaven, sent by a woman who had guarded the truth out of love. The letter arrived on a Saturday morning, its seal worn, the paper scented with the sweetness of time. The mailman smiled, setting it on my table. "Smells like good news, Mrs. Ruby." I laughed. Let's hope heaven used the right post office. I opened it carefully. The name at the bottom made my heart warm. Ellen Parker, the former bank manager. The woman God used to safeguard copies when everything seemed lost. "Dear Ruby, I heard you found the courage to act. I also needed courage to write. I've always admired you, not only for resisting injustice, but for doing it without losing your faith. 20 years ago, when I opened your account and little Darius stood by your side, I remember what you said. I want to leave a future for him, even if the present costs me dearly. Today I see the future you left wasn't money, it was example. Women like us never walk alone. With affection, Ellen." The tears came, but they were light. The breeze through the window turned the pages with me. I closed my eyes and felt Elias, Bernice, Simone, and so many others around me, a quiet network of women holding one another up. I felt the spirit whisper, "You weren't betrayed, child. You were chosen to awaken others." The following week, the idea took life. Sister Bernice and I sat in the small back room of the church, each with a notebook and a cup of coffee. We taped a handwritten sheet on the wall in simple, steady letters. "Never Alone, Ministry of Faith and Dignity." 6 women came to the first meeting, then 15. Each carried a familiar story: a son who took her pension, a brother who forged her signature, a husband who vanished with what little remained. But the miracle was the same in all of them. Faith was still breathing. I listened in silence, and whenever the pain threatened to steal the air, someone would take someone else's hand. There, crying wasn't weakness. It was testimony, a choir of survivors. During the next service, the pastor called us to the front. "These women are building something new," he said. "Not a circle of sorrow, but an altar of new beginnings." The applause was soft, reverent, the kind reserved for miracles. I took the microphone with trembling hands and let the Spirit speak through me. "Pain taught me how to live for myself, but God taught me how to live for others without losing who I am. And if this story reaches a tired woman, may she know, never alone." The church echoed with that word. The amen came like an embrace. Outside, Naomi was waiting by the gate. Her eyes were swollen, her face clean. She held an envelope in her hands. "Dad asked me to give you this," she said softly. I opened it. A simple note. "Mom, I've started therapy. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, but I want to learn what the Lord showed you. Responsibility. Thank you for still being light when I was shadow. Naomi." The wind passed between us, carrying away the words pride might have left behind. We just looked at each other, and when she hugged me, I realized forgiveness is the only contract signed with the heart. I went home before sunset. The studio smelled of jasmine and mint tea. I opened the windows, and sunlight poured in through golden slits, painting the walls in shades of honey. On the table, I left my journal open and wrote the final lines. My dignity is not negotiable. Evidence is respect for the future. Faith is the language through which divine justice speaks. I closed the notebook and drew a long breath. The distant church bells mingled with Mahalia Jackson's voice on the radio. Precious Lord, take my hand. And in that moment, I understood. The miracle wasn't getting back what had been taken from me. It was finding myself again. If this story has reached you, it's not by chance. Maybe God brought you here to remind you. Faith isn't the absence of pain. It's the thread that keeps you standing when everything pulls you down. If this story touched you, write "Never Alone" in the comments. This is your refuge, a space for women who've chosen dignity. Subscribe and share it with someone who needs to remember. God never abandons the one who chooses to rise. Pain became legacy, loss became voice, and faith, once again, proved that heaven never forgets names written in tears. They told me to leave, not knowing the blessing was leaving with me.